I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Well, Halloween's done, and I can finally just sit back and relax and mind my own goddamn... Oh, son of a... It's you again. All right, take a seat, you little idiot. I was just reflecting on the fact that Halloween's done, life can go back to normal, and I'm gonna read Hellflower again, which... Anyways, welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement, as I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to continue reading Hellflower by George O. Smith. You want to learn about the author? Sure, I still have Wikipedia. George O. Smith, born April 9th, 1911, died May 27th, 1981. He was an American science fiction author. He's not to be confused with George H. Smith. I forgot about this. This is where they try to get cute on Wikipedia. Another American science fiction author. Smith was an active contributor to astounding science fiction during the golden age of science fiction in the 1940s. His collaboration with the magazine's editor, John W. Campbell Jr., was interrupted when Campbell's first wife, Donna, it's got a thing above the N, left him in 1949 and married Smith. Creepy Smith. Smith continued regularly publishing science fiction novels and stories till 1960. His output greatly diminished during the 1960s and 70s when he had a job that required his undivided attention. He was awarded the first Fandom Hall of Fame award in 1980, and he was a member of the all-male literary banqueting club, which sounds so lame to begin with. Plus, it's all-male. The Trapdoor Spiders, which served as the basic of Isaac Asimov's fictional group of mystery solvers, the Black Widowers. Let's waste some time. Want to hear some fun facts I stole from ebookfriendly.com? Sure. The first ever Harry Potter was a short story published in communist Poland in 1972. The boy who lived was, in fact, lived ever since March 1972, when literary magazine Ziki Literackle published a short story titled Harry Potter, and the author, Jan Rostowerski, was a Polish writer and poet who, as a soldier in the Polish army, spent 28 years in Great Britain. Rostowerski's text tells the story of a 17-year-old Harry whose life is much more muggle-like than his namesake. In fact, it is rather ordinary. As a shopkeeper, he delivers the original Krakowonian sausage and pickles. And in the end, he suddenly vanishes. Okay, I still got time before the grandfather clock? Fine. In the Harvard Library, there are 3 books suspected to be bound in human skin. Well, that's gross. One of Harvard Library's books, Des Destinies de l'Âme, is 99% certain to have been bound in human skin. It's been sitting in Harvard's Houghton Library since the 1930s. The practice of binding books in human skin was not at all uncommon in the 15th century and was done to commemorate the dead, among other reasons. Still, no grandfather clock, so I can shut up and just read the story. Thank God. Okay, well, with that, why don't we go downstairs and roll the dice that this book won't offend me and I can actually finish it. Okay, well, there you are. Why don't you take a little seat? I'm basically just kind of counting down the days of me reading this book. Now that we're out of Halloween and I can't read fun, spooky stories anymore, especially from my friend Becky, I have to just read this thing. Why did I pick this thing? I didn't know it was going to be as bad as it is. It's playing right now. It's pretty sexist already, but it's going to get real disturbing, I got a feeling. I'm just dodging when I drop this book because it's too offensive. But here we go with Chapter 7. Cinnabar was inside the sunlight zone by 1,000 miles, and its sun was always in the same spot of the sky. Weird. It was a well-contrived city, built so that the streets were lighted either directly or by reflections. That's planning. Cinnabar was also one of the show cities of the system, but Faradine found that it did not show him the right things. He could have learned as much about Hellflowers on Terra merely because New York had a larger public library. He tried everything he could think of and made no progress. His trail had turned to ice after Cahill's death. He loafed and poked his nose in here and there. And drank a bit and varied his routine from man about town to the spaceman concerned about his future. There was only one bright spot. His listing had been tentatively taken up by a group of school teachers on a sabbatical. Who had seen Mercury and now wanted a cheap trip to Pluto. Who wants to go to... Why would you go to Pluto? There's nothing... It's inhospitable. Faradine had accepted this job for about 3 weeks later, and it gave him a payload to Pluto. And when he got there, it would be time to do the subcrafting job that Clevis had set up as a combined source of revenue and as a means of contact. Once each month, Faradine was to haul a shipment of refined thorium, ore from Pluto to Terra. A private job that paid well. In the meantime, Faradine could nose around Mercury to see what he could see. What's there to nose around? It's an inhospitable planet. Then he could haul his school teachers to Pluto and pick up his thorium, which he definitely made his actions look reasonably normal to the official eye. On the end of the drums of semi-refined thorium, there would be a spot of fluorescent paint. On one end of the drums of semi-refined... Why is it repeating this? Weird. This ebook is all messed up. There'd be a spot of fluorescent paint. I just turned the page and started repeating the same thing. This doesn't concern you as a listener. Normally invisible. He was to wash off this spot so long as he had nothing to report. If it remained, then something was wrong with Faradine. He had not turned up and he had nothing to report. Clevis would know what to do next. And so Faradine watched the date grow closer and closer, and his hopes of having something to report grow less and less likely. He felt as though he had given up. In fact, he got to the point where he wondered how a man could get a love lotus if he wanted one. The prevalence of the dope seemed high enough, but as far as Faradine was concerned, it was harder than buying a real gold brick. There did not seem to be any for sale, and he thought that perhaps his method of attack was wrong, and yet he did not know how to correct it. He cursed under his breath at the futility of it. I realized that this curse must have been audible because he felt a touch on his elbow and a voice asking, "Is it that bad?" He turned slowly, his mind working fast to think of something to say that would not be leading in the wrong direction. He started, and then he saw that the voice, to which had been low-pitched enough that he had been the voice of a man, had come from the throat of a tall, dark-haired woman who sat beside him at the bar. "I was just wondering what strangers do for excitement on Mercury," he finished lamely. "Spaceman?" "Yes, I guessed it," she laughed at her low contralto. "But spacemen aren't the only ones who drink that watered-down whiskey. I know, but it's this time it is one." She smiled again. "Is Cinnabar so inhospitable?" she asked. "To strangers, it seems so. But to me, it seems quite normal. It makes the rest of the solar system sound like a very exciting place." "Born on Mercury?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I was born on Venus. I spent 4 years on Terra before my folks brought me to Mercury. But my last space trip took place when I was 9. Tell me, what is New York like?" "Buildings and people and mad rushing around. Any change in the last 100 years has been for taller buildings and more people at a higher velocity of humanity. But anybody can find anything he wants somewhere in New York, if he has the money to buy it." She smiled calmly. "I'll show you that Cinnabar is not an inhospitable place," she said. "You may take me to dinner if you wish." Oh, I wish. He chuckled. And since we haven't a mutual friend to introduce us, I'm Charles Faradine. How do you do? She said solemnly, putting a lithe hand in his. I'm Carolyn Niles. And she shook a little step out from the bar and made him a slight curtsy. Oh, he saw that she was almost as tall as he was and grinned as he thought that her figure was far better than his. Ugh. Again, this book dances around me dropping it. How shall we meet, he asked. Well, we shall not meet, said Carolyn. We shall play it very bright and very interesting. Oh, you shall drive me home, and then we will have a cocktails with my folks. What? And then you will meet them. Weird. And you will be an old friend of Michael's, who is a sort of school chum of my brother. After cocktails, I will run upstairs to change, and you will make polite conversation with the family, none of whom eat personable young men? All right, fine. Though they may scare them to death by having father show them the fine collection of terrain shotguns he owns. Then we will go out to your spacecraft, and you will change while I roam around and investigate the insides. This I will like because it's been some time since I've seen the insides of a spacer. Oh, I forgot they call them spacers in this. Done, agreed Faradine. Something rapped him on the elbow, and he had to look down before he saw a boy of 10 or so, with a green paper-lined box containing flowers. The young merchant had an eye for business. He eyed Faradine knowingly and smiled at Carolyn fetchingly. A corsage, $1. Faradine grinned, and then almost recoiled before he realized that nowhere in the solar system could a love lotus be purchased for $1. These were definitely gardenias. And then he brought one over to cover up his confusion. He handed it to Carolyn, and she pinned the gardenia. Oh, no, please don't tell me that this is where it's going to happen. Is it chapter 7 when I finally decided not to read this book anymore? She pinned the gardenia to her dark hair as she smiled her thanks, and then led him from the bar to an open roadster almost as low and long as the curb it was parked against. Caroline handed him her keys, and Faradine drove according to her directions until he came to the rambling house just outside the city limits. She introduced him, and he was received graciously. Her father was a tall, distinguished man, with a dab of gray at the temples, and a rather stern face that became completely unstern whenever he smiled, which was frequently. Carolyn's mother was tall and dark, with only a sprinkle of gray. The brother was not present, which made it completely easy for Faradine, who could not have given any account of his friendship to an unknown Michael and stated a friend of Robert Niles. Mr. Niles mixed a pitcher of martinis and inquired about the spaceman's business. Faradine explained how it was. Oh, Mr. Niles laughed at the story of fish one day and fin the next. And he said that he thought that he couldn't quite be that bad, really. Faradine grinned, and Mr. Niles observed that a man who can operate a spacer, I hate that word, and pay off mortgage on the craft must not be entirely penniless or without prospects. Mrs. Niles countered with, I suppose it takes money to operate, Mr. Faradine. A fair amount. The spaceman begins to think in large figures, so much as he wonders how he can get along on a more humanly reasonable amount. To clear a reasonable standard of living, a rather staggering amount of money comes in one hand and goes out the other. Operating expenses are high, but so are charges. Do you land on Mercury often? Mr. Faradine said. Faradine said, perhaps less frequently in the past than in the future. Sheer flattery, laughed Carolyn. Better enjoy it, observed the father with a chuckle. Oh, Charles, you are welcome here any time you land. Well, thank you, smiled Faradine. But all things considered, I should think that you take a dim view of any man that brought your daughter home wearing a gardenia. Gardenia? Oh, you mean it might be, Mr. Niles laughed. I think Carolyn has enough judgment to take up with the right kind of young man, Charles. Oh, of course, said Mrs. Niles. Robert and Michael would stay friends with the wrong kind. So you see, laughed Mr. Niles. Oh, by the way, asked Mrs. Niles, how is Michael? Quite well. Last time I saw him, said Faradine, quite sure that this is the right thing to say at this time. Are you sure? Of course. Well, I'm happy to hear it, said Mrs. Niles. We knew he was with you, but we didn't know how long you stayed. Faraday gulped imperceptibly, and he hoped that they didn't notice. You did? Then he must have mentioned me. Oh, he did. Tell me, Charles, what happened to Michael? Did something happen to him? Mr. Niles eyed Faraday rather pointedly. Mike took off with you from Mars. He did not land at Denver, Mr. Faraday. So what happened to Mike Cahill? Faraday gulped. Oh, and this time it was full-throated gulp that left him with his Adam's apple high in his throat. Caroline cooed, Yes, Charles, what happened to Michael Cahill? Oh, a shiver crossed Faraday's nerves. He felt a muscle-loosening tinge of fear. His thinking mechanism stopped functioning. You mean his brain? His mind buzzed with a frenetic insistence that he say something, but he was completely unprepared. Oh, he dimly knew that his long speechlessness was as damning as any story he could have prepared after such a pause. Oh, he thought all the way around the circle, coming back to the fact that he should say something, but his mind did not furnish him with anything to say. Then it occurred to him that he need not say anything. The die had been cast, and he stood accused twice, once by Niles' family and once by his own shocked reaction. What he must do was act for the next moment because the past moment was irreparable. One of the two things was evident. Either Cahill was a double-dealing rat, or that the man was a hand in glove with Niles, and that meant... Faraday laughed at his own simplicity. It was a sort of brief, scornful bark. What's funny? Asked Mr. Niles. It just occurred to me, the brilliant concept that you people are either innocent or guilty. Very sage, commented Niles dryly. You don't seem quite that bright, Mr. Faraday, not even that bright. Now, what happened to Cahill? Only for a fleeting moment did Faraday follow the possibility that Niles was innocent. There had been no attempt on Cahill's part to contact anyone from the time Faraday met him until he saw him last alive. Ergo, the Niles must have been forearmed with Cahill's plan. This was the place that Cahill would have brought him. It had been taking him just a bit longer to get out of here without the proper guide. He leaned back, trying to relax. He took a sip of his martini, and not that he wanted it, but to see if his hand were still trembling, and it did not seem to shake. He said... If you knew Cahill and his whereabouts, you also know quite a bit about me, he said. You'll have heard that I was recognized in a bar on Ganymede by a woman named Norma Hamden, who is a Hellflower addict. She hated my guts because I am Charles Faraday, and her brother was among those present when I had the accident in the bog. She hung on to me for an emotional ride it gave her, and I succeeded in locating the home of her parents and was going to take her home when I met Cahill, who offered to come along after a bit of talk. And then during the night, Cahill made a pass at Norma, and she shot him, and I put his body out through the scuttle port. Cahill was always a damned fool, nodded Niles. He was dang crazy idiot, and it served him right. Some men prefer money, power, or model railroads. Women are poison. I seem to have followed one of them like a little lamb, said Faraday, but I was picked up by and brought here for a purpose. So let's get down to cases. You're rather quick on the trigger, man, aren't you? What makes you assume that this purpose was anything beyond finding out about Cahill? Because you have tipped your hand, said Faraday, feeling it more at ease. You have accomplished the same thing by tipping the police and waiting for the case to be newscast. If Cahill admitted to Hellflower running, it was a purpose too. I call the same logic in you, Niles. Please, Mr. Niles. I am a bit your senior. Well, with that, why don't we take a little break? We could go down to my basement and learn about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House. Going to my basement is not weird. It's fine. It's normal. It's cool down there. I made it cool with all the teen hangout stuff. The fact that I talk about bringing teens to my basement is also normal. Why don't we just go down to the basement and I'll let you know about new books. Oh, There you are. Why don't you take a seat there on that one folding chair underneath that naked light bulb while I stand here underneath this naked light bulb and play my guitar for you. Yeah. My basement's fine. I got a couch. I got a little coffee table. I got a little rug. I got a TV, the tube television that I hooked up Google TV to. So it's a cool hangout spot for teens. Is it weird that I keep talking about how teens can hang out here? No, I don't bring teens down here to talk about new and upcoming books from Penguin Random House. I just want to make you know that it's a cool place to hang out. Why is that so bad? It's if teens did come down here, they'd be like, oh, this place seems great. Let's smoke some weed, which is what teens do all the time. So anyways, why don't we learn about the latest books from Penguin Random House, like Mr. Nice Spy, get it? By Tiana Smith. You want to learn about Mr. Nice Spy? Sure you do. When a pyrotechnic engineer discovers her biological father is an international criminal, she must work with a sexy CIA agent to take him down in this thrilling adventure rom-com. Andy Paxton knows she's good at her job as a fireworks designer. What she doesn't know is that her diabolical father is Holt, a dangerous arms dealer who has escaped prison, and now he's searching for a long-lost daughter dearest. What she doesn't know is that her biological father is Holt, a dangerous arms dealer who escaped prison. Did she not know her father was in prison for any period of time? They should explain that one better. Like, he's just been gone. She's like, where is he? I don't know, working. And then it's like, aha, I'm back. Or, I don't know. Does she know? Anyways, after the CIA surprises her with this news, they drop another bombshell. They want to use Andy as bait to capture Holt once and for all. But before the CIA can even attempt to spring their trap, she's kidnapped along with the very hot officer, Adam Chan. All because they were too busy flirting to worry about the silly things like, quote, safety protocol, unquote. A fake relationship, dash, for their protection, of course, dash, and just a few explosions bring Andy and Chen closer. Of course, every single one of these romance books I read about, it always is a fake relationship where they actually fall in love. Can anyone think of anything new? There's more to their growing connection at stake. If Holt's plan succeeds, the world will be brought to its knees. Andy and Chan must rely on each other to stop him, or else everything, including their feelings for each other, might just blow up in their faces. That's Mr. Nice Spy by Tiana Smith. Its category is contemporary romance. You can find it for $19 on November 5th from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and if you're looking for a romance novel that is about spies, that goes in a new direction that you've never seen before, and really upends the expectations of spy romance novels, you will not find it in this book as you stand there thumbing through the romance novel books at Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs and get out of this teen hangout and finish reading this chapter of Hellflower. Yeah, right. Take a seat, turd. Let's get back into the story. I feel like we're inching closer. She's wearing this flower on her dress, and I am terrified that it's going to get real gross, and I'm going to have to drop this. The fact that the parents are like, oh, she's wearing a flower? Well, we can trust you, right? Like, does not everyone know what they look like at this point? Like, it's a sexual assault drug. Basically, at this point, you would think that if you could see it on someone's clothes, you'd know, like, get that thing off you. But apparently in this universe, like, I don't know, you're wearing a flower, it doesn't bother me. All right, Mr. Niles, I've learned one thing so far. I can tell a Love Lotus operator from the rest of the system. How? They all lean forward eagerly. Because it is the real operators that take an amused view of my alleged machinations. Oh, they know the facts. Very sage. You're a bit brighter than you appeared a moment ago. May I ask why you let me cool my heels for almost a month before you hauled me in? He looked at Carolyn with a wry smile. I would have made a mild bet that you weren't more than a few 100 feet from me all the while. You're a blind man, Faradine, she said calmly. Mr. Niles smiled knowingly. There are a lot of unexplained items in your past, Faradine. We never could be too sure that you were not a Sandman. Oh, of course, it does seem a bit hard to believe that a government operative would have crashed a spacer and killed 33 people just to establish a bad reputation, especially when his own neck is involved in the affair. Still, such a deal might have been managed. So we have been checking on you from that angle, and you're clean. Oh, then there comes the question to Cahill. Oh, it might be that you thought turning in a Hellflower operator would help smooth your lot in life. Mayhap, who says mayhap in the future, get you a bit of a reward? So we waited. No, Cahill started to bring you here. He would either have turned up or with or without you, or he would have gotten in touch with us. Unless Cahill was dead, you would know the answer. Norma Hannon is keeping her mouth shut, so far as we know. Of course, no one would believe a blank anyway. She probably knows that, so it stands to reason that you know more about that, Cahill, than anybody else. No more than I've told you. Cahill came and made me a sort of a sidelong offer. Well, that much of it rings true as any other, but there are still holes in your story. Faraday nodded. Let's put it this way. There are ways of getting money and things, and I found one way, which is an obvious fact, but I have been told time and again that entering a wedge into a full confession is a willingness to talk. Do you follow me? I do, but Faradine smiled. I don't care to face it. Not in company, Mr. Niles. Faradine's emphasis on the Mr. was heavy with sarcasm. Why? Because he's not a Mr.? Niles looked at him piercingly. Yeah, bit belligerent and a trifle sure of yourself. Closed mouth and apparently able to get along. You'll be out on a lonely limb for some time, Faradine, but we can use you. I can use the sugar, said Faradine. Naturally, anyone can use money. In fact, everybody needs money. What visible means of support have you? I have a subcontract. Once a month, I'm to lug a load of thorium refines to Pluto and then to Terra. It's a start, but it's not enough. Well, I'll pick up more, doubtless. Niles leaned back, put his tips of his fingers together pontifically. One of the hardest jobs in this business is to justify your standard of living. The financial rewards are large, and the hours involved are small. It is patient that a man who has not been granted a large inheritance or perhaps stumbled on a lucrative asteroid cannot live in a semi-royal manner without having to work in a semi-royal fury. One of the great risks in this business is the acceptance of a recruit whose appearance causes discussion. The day when a man can build a $50,000 home on a $5,000 salary without causing more than a raised eyebrow has gone. If a man has a hidden income, he must appear busy enough to warrant it, or at least provide a reasonable facsimile. This I can understand. For a job like this, explained Niles, we prefer the natural-born spaceman. With sand in his shoes or space dust in his eyes. I hate this. Because the man with a bad case of wanderlust always looks busy, even when he's idling. You seem to be that sort, but we never can tell until it's tried. Unless, of course, you turned out to be, woman crazy. I'm a normal enough male, said Faradine. I'll remind you that Cahill was the guy that tried and failed. Well, how normal are you? Demanded Niles. We'd have less liking for misogynists than for a satyr here. Faradine smiled serenely. I have enough sense to keep my hands off Norma Hannon, but I have enough red blood to come home with Carolyn. Is that good enough? Niles stopped for a moment. It could be. Anyway, we'll find out. For one thing, Faradine, you'll be in no position to hurt anyone but yourself if you're playing games. Once we're really sure of you, it won't matter anymore because you will be in a position to get hurt plenty. We'll try it and see. Now, when do you go to Pluto? I got some school teachers to haul out there tomorrow. I've taken them on. Good. Gives you a good background without much labor. Now, when you land on Terra, you're not bothered posting your ship for a job because you'll have already contracted for a job. Carolyn will be there on a business trip for me, and we'll have chartered your ship for a hauling job back to Mercury. During this trip, you'll get some more details on how you are to operate. This much I can tell you. Faradine, you will be in betweener. Sorry, it's repeating again. It's none of your business. In fact, almost the operator you set yourself up to be, but with one difference. We'll inform you just who is and who is not to be trusted. In other words, you'll have your regular customers, and then you will sell to no one else. Oh, they'll take your entire supply, pay for it, and take a profit. Oh, and the remainder you'll use to purchase your supply from the upper source. Advancement may come, slow or fast, depending on you, and you'll get the details later. As for now, Niles leaned back in his chair and smiled. Faradine, you met my daughter in a cocktail lounge, and several people heard the two of you planning an evening together. So you'll go dancing and dining and have a drink or two and maybe a bit of lovemaking, which is entirely natural performance. And from this moment, you will be Charles and I shall be Mr. Niles, and we'll have no nonsense. Understand? I do. Good. And then we'll have another martini while Carolyn dresses for dinner. Niles poured. Carolyn disappeared. Mrs. Niles leaned forward and asked, Charles, why did you become a spaceman? Her tone, or voice, and attitude made her seem like all the other fathers and mothers who have asked the same question. For the moment, he forgot about her position in this odd scheme of things, just because she looked precisely fitted to the role she played for public consumption. Almost mechanically, Faradine began to explain that he knew the story by rote, because he had told it so often in the same manner and in the same sort of person. This gave his mind a chance to consider them, partly. Mr. and Mrs. Niles appeared to be the successful businessman and his wife. The aura of respectability extended to include the house and its spacious grounds, so that Faradine burned with resentment at any proposition whereby he, who had not committed anything more than a few misdemeanors and some rather normal fun and games, which were listed on the books but are to be likely overlooked, should be less cultured, less successful, and less poised than this family of low-grade vultures. If anything, the attitude of Mrs. Niles shocked him more than the acts of her husband. Men were part of the race that play the rough games and run up the score, according to Faradine. Women occupied one of two positions. Oh, here we go. They were patterned after Faradine's mother, who had been a poised, mature woman of education and breeding, if a trifle puritanical. Oh, they were slatterns and sluts, and they looked as well and acted the part. So instead of Mr. Niles presiding over a mansion as a gracious lady, Mrs. Niles, she would be loud and cheap. That she was poised and gracious offended Faradine's sense of fitness. Oh, my God. Okay. I'm getting through this book. It hasn't gotten to the point where I just can't read it, but I'm getting through this book. As for Carolyn, who was equally engaged in this loathsome game, Faradine felt annoyed because there was nothing about her outward appearance that would permit him to scorn her. Like her parents, she gave the impression of success, as though the business they were all engaged with were both honorable and beneficial. Faradine yearned for the moment when he could pull the pedestal out from under them and then dump them into the mud where they damn well belonged. Faradine became, in those few moments, a more mature man. He understood Clevis's attitude. Always before, he wondered why a clever man would work for peanuts at a thankless job, which included anonymity, when he could have put his efforts into some sort of business and emerge wealthy and famous. Now, Faradine was beginning to understand the personal satisfaction that could be gained by following the footsteps of a man like Clevis. In Niles' own words, some men make money. Others like power, and still others build model railroads. Well, some achieve their personal gain by rooting out the lice that undermine the moral fiber of the race. What, the race? And this gives him the same satisfaction that amassing $1 billion gives to a man whose ambition is wealth. Money had never been Faradine's god. Oh, he had not wanted more than enough to exchange for the fun and the games he preferred, and these did not come high. He found himself elated to have discovered a new outlet for his nervous energy and his urge to do something. Performing a thankless job in anonymity would provide for Faradine a deep satisfaction in providing that he was smarter than people like Niles and family. Oh, he smiled as his mouth got to the point of the story where he was telling about the time that he had landed a trading ship perfectly, but 9 feet above ground. So the ship dropped the 9 feet and nearly flunked him out of spaceman school. Oh, he knew that his smile was hypocritical and he enjoyed this sort of thing. Oh, if Niles could play the hypocritical game, so could Faradine. But Faradine could play it better because his own kind of hypocrisy was... he hated to call it righteous, but it would not find a better word to describe it. He could play Niles' game, and he could not find a better word to describe it. Oh, he could play, but he could not get along with Mrs. Niles, though he wondered how a woman that looked as honorable as Mrs. Niles could justify her willingness to have a daughter and engage in the foul game of Hellflower running. Oh, he could play their game because he would have little contact with them. But he wondered whether he could play the game Carolyn expected. He did not know exactly what she was expecting, but his guess was that anybody amoral enough to run dope would hardly cavil at anything else. All right, whatever. He knew that many a man would lie in his teeth and play the role of spy convincingly. But when the role included making love to a woman whose background was distasteful to a man, Faradine believed that this distaste would show through anything he did. And then Caroline came down the stairs in a white strapless evening dress, and Faradine knew that he was going to have trouble remembering that she was worthy of only shapeless gray prison denim. You have to dress too, Charles, she said in a soft voice, reminding him of their plans for the evening. Faradine nodded and got up, and he wondered how she could possibly act the part of a young, marriageable woman, pleased with the date, when at the same time she was engaged in a hellishly illegal operation. How he realized at the same time that Carolyn had most likely spent her entire life this way and was attuned to it. Such was the natural way of living, and there was not going to be any possibility of weaning her into a life of honorable struggle. Jesus Christ, everything's about this woman not being honorable. Okay, then she put her hand into his elbow and gave it a squeeze. And Faradine found it, not too hard to put his personal attitude into a small compartment in his mind and half close the door. The bait was very attractive. She's bait. And only the image of Norma Hannon and her dulled eyes remained with Faradine to keep the compartment of his mind open to the character of Caroline Niles. Okay, well, that's the end of that chapter. I got out from the bullseye on my back of, like, this is going to get real gross. But we survived it, and we lived to read another chapter. Why don't we go downstairs to the smoking room and have a cigarette? And we can talk about what the hell we just read. Okay, I'm coming. Okay, I'm here. I had to pee. Welcome to the smoking room. And you can see here on the table in front of you is a baboon skull. And if you remove its top cranium, there's... my wife's burns. If you remove the top cranium, you'll see that the baboon skull is filled with cigarettes. Go ahead and have one. They're delightful. Cigarettes are fantastic. What do we learn in this chapter? Not a whole lot. It just kind of set up something, which is that he's going on a date with, I think, a woman that might not completely understand the setup that the parents put her in. I think she's also in on it. I'm not sure. Who knows? Who cares? But she's given a flower from a kid at the bar that he's at, which it's the 1950s when he wrote this. Maybe it's normal for people to walk around saying corsage, and then you put one on somebody. I don't know, 1950s. What do I know about that? So it's like 50-50 if this is a Hellflower or not. We have no idea. If it is, where does this story turn? Does he wind up making the stuff with her? If it does, I'm done reading this book. But And that's kind of it. Talks to the parents. The parents are in on the trade, apparently. And so he doesn't like them, and he wants them all to burn to the ground. But then also their daughter is so attractive, he doesn't care so much. And it's fine. Whatever. It's fine. The story's still fine. It could shock me. Maybe it goes in a better direction, and I'm like, oh, this is actually a good story. It's still, mildly sexist, but whatever. It could go in a good direction, or it's going to be in the direction I think it's probably going to end up in, which I'm not afraid to drop a book. I'll drop a book at the drop of a hat. I've done it with Peter Pan when I learned about the author and how fucking horrible he was because he basically abducted these children and did horrible things to them, and then they didn't have good lives. You can learn about that or go back and listen if you want to. I dropped that when Tinkerbell said she came back from an orgy. I'm like, this is a children's book, and I know this guy's history. This is disgusting, so I dropped it. I'll drop this one too if I have to. That's about it. There's really nothing else to talk about with this. My big plan, if I didn't say this already, is that after this book, I'm done reading long books. I'm getting tired of doing the podcast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a podcast once every 2 weeks, and I'll just kind of read a short story. And that way I won't hate myself like when I read a book like this. So I just got to get through this book. Oh God, do I want to drop this book. So anyways, that's pretty much it. There's nothing else to reflect on with this. It's just one chapter of horse shit. I'm not expecting good things. So I will see you next week. Bye. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, Just Day in the Curious Mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.